It's the Doug Rising Show. Well, the Doug Rising Show. Well, the Doug Rising Show. And I'm Doug Rice. I love it. Good morning. How you doing? 7 o'clock in the morning. How are you doing? Oh, yeah, folks. How you doing this morning? Welcome to the Doug Rice Show. We are just careening into September. September is just snagged us by the throat, and it's squeezing because we're about to hit that Christmas season. Oh yeah, here it comes. I mean, across the street from me, I got the Halloween crap. That's what I see. Good Lord have mercy. Here we go. Paganism is about to grip the minds of the masses and grab their asses. Okay, how you doing this, folks? Again, Doug Rice, how you doing? I've been doing this since 2021. Getting it done. And we seem to have found a format that I know will engross the minds of millions. No, it won't. It won't. My numbers are low. I'm cool with that. I have a job. I work. I ask you for your support. I mean, I'm not a jerk. But I tell you what, I love doing this. I get up every morning, and it seems as the day is dawning, while most of you are still yawning, I get up and do the research, and maybe I've done it the night before. But, you know, I find information I simply can't ignore. I just can't. And so I think I found the show's format, and I want to say this clearly. I am not a spiritual leader per se. I would not get in the lane of the folks that have led me to this place. I don't, for some reason, I find even the notion that I might do the things that Dante Fortson and T.L. Ministries, Yacoba, and his brother, Evo, I can't lose it. Evo, I can't lose it. But I think of those two as one person. I do. And I don't veer outside the lane of those three ministers, and neither should you. I mean, that's my opinion. And it's worth about as much as a fart in the wind. I mean, every predicated informational opinion I stand on is thin. Take everything I say with a grain of salt unless I bring receipts. And I intend to bring receipts every time I hit the live. There are no airwaves these days. That's so dated and played. All right, folks, good morning. I hope you're having a good Thursday, because that's what day it is. Yes, tell me, computer, is it Thursday? Yes, it is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. And today, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, my Negroes, I think you're going to clearly see the connection between colorism and white supremacy. Actually, you can't see it clearly. I didn't even know there was a connection until I came across this senior thesis. Let me show you what I'm talking about. While I'm at it, you folks like, subscribe, share, comment. Detrina should be there. So should Antoine Anderson. Antoine has a job too. Let me just tell you, dude is serious. Antoine is a serious character, man. I like him a lot. And we need brothers like Antoine, but boy, oh man, I pity the fool. Yep, he'll take you to school. All right, let's look at this. Let's check this out. Now I'm not gonna do the whole getting in and out. I'm not gonna do the magnification, and I'm not gonna do that anyway. You should be able to see every word that's on the screen. And because I don't look at chat, well, I guess I may not know what you mean, but you can tell the trainer, and she might text me. I know the minute I break my focus, that'll be a wreck, see? All right, so what are we going over today? This provided to you by Detrina, moderator extraordinaire to the bottom of you, to the left of you, up, down. You know, she's got the blue thing with the, okay, moving on. Detrina, fast becoming a researcher and producer of the Doug Rice Show, In fact, let me announce it now that Detrina is officially the producer of The Doug Rice Show because she produced this, you know? So here we go. All right, so check this out. This from Fordham University, Fordham Research Commons, a senior thesis brought to you by Taylor Nicole Bell, a Negro we can tell. And in the spring of 2023, she penned this thesis I'm about to read. It is so chaptered and named The Connection Between Colorism and White Supremacy. Colorism as a tool of white supremacy in the contemporary age in the United States and Puerto Rico. Taylor Nicole Bell. Now, I've done just a little bit of reading forward just to make sure that her style combines with mine. I think that we'll be fine. So let's move forward and stimulate our minds. All right, let's do this. Can everybody see it? I don't know. Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you see me? I don't think so. Here we go. Connection between colorism and white supremacy. Same thing. Taylor Bell, boom. International, boom. Thesis advisor, Robert Anderson. Seminar advisor, Kaylee Johnson. Now, folks, you can pause it right there and you can communicate with these people. This is some stimulating Negro provided information. And it's not readily available and made available to our nation. Not too much, but we'll see, and thus and such. So here we have the table of contents. Now, this should take me about 2 days. This will be part 1. And I will not stop reading until the reading is done. Okay? So there we go. Let's do this. On with the show. I'm going to read everything too, just so you know. Abstract. Here we go, folks. As the world moves into a perceived post-racial era, it is important to acknowledge and understand the existing presence and strength of white supremacy. While outright expressions of racism become less acceptable, people of color continue to face discrimination in multiple facets of their lives. One way to preserve and strengthen white supremacy in the modern age is through color-based discrimination or colorism. Across the globe, people of a lighter complexion or those in closer proximity to whiteness experience privileges and better treatment than those of a darker complexion. My thesis aims to argue that colorism in the modern age is a tool of white supremacy by looking at colorism in the United States and Puerto Rico. These case studies function to show how colorism has been used as a tool of white supremacy in the modern age. By looking at these two countries, I aim to analyze the detrimental nature of colorism and white supremacy in societies with different racial classification systems and views on race to show that it is a global phenomenon. Within these case studies, I looked at the colonial influence, history, demographics, racial classification systems, legislation, and presence of white supremacy in each respective country across the histories and into the present day. I found that regardless of the perceived importance of race, colorism has had a significant impact on the way that people of color see themselves and others. It causes tension and division within racial groups and helps white supremacy thrive on a subtle, largely unchallenged level. Okay, so very good. Her abstract, it appears solid, foundational in its premise, and we can expect more of this as we move forward. And I dig her aim. to argue that colorism in the modern age is a tool of white supremacy, and they're going to look at it here on the mainland, and of course, Puerto Rico, which doesn't even count in the minds of most Americans who are anything but us, and such and thus. All right, so let's continue to her introduction. And please, folks, I do this because I'm moved to do it. I'm not going to express any real kind of, movement from God Almighty. I don't know about that. I don't really profess that, but I can say that this is something that allows me to lead with the kingdom every day in my own kind of way. So let's get back to it and see what she has to say. Okay. Introduction. A. White supremacy. White supremacy is defined as beliefs and ideas purporting natural superiority of the lighter-skinned or white human races over other racial groups. White supremacy has a complex history that can trace its roots back generations, specifically to the transatlantic slave trade, which began in the 1480s when the Portuguese began establishing colonies and enslaving Black Africans. Now, we know they were targeting Negroes, those of us set apart, chosen by God to represent his kingdom on earth. That would be you and me. Quit looking for it. I'm just saying that. Back to it. The practice of enslaving Black Africans and using them as sources of labor continued until 1888, when Brazil abolished slavery. Consequently, more than 15 million African men, women, and children were enslaved over the course of the transatlantic slave trade and were viewed as property instead of people. Well, now, okay, let's set this foundation, baby. Despite this practice of enslavement being abolished globally, rhetoric continued to maintain white supremacy over other races. One of the earliest examples of white supremacy after the transatlantic slave trade can be seen in the writings and scientific practices of white authors, politicians, and scientists. The eugenics movement was one of the earliest scientific justifications for white supremacy. Listen carefully. The term eugenics was coined in 1883 by Francis Galton. Its purpose was to improve the quality of the human race by encouraging the reproduction of humans with desirable traits and discouraging those with weaker traits. Oh, really? The eugenics movement was later used to justify the sterilization of minorities, as scientists believe that American society would improve by breeding white people as their intelligence was assumed to be higher than that of people of color. Well, let me just pause right there for the goddamn. Okay, folks. Are you reading it? Let me tell you something. Antoine Anderson, my manager, I'm so excited for his first meeting with my first gig. There'll be police involved, I'm sure. Anyway, I gotta tell you, look, eugenics, folks. The folks that are involved with eugenics, okay? Antoine tells me I bring receipts. I coined that phrase. I want that phrase. Check my math. That's a Dougism. Check my math. This is the math, folks. I bring you the equation. It's offered to you freely. Ask for it, I'll give it to you. Donate, I'll provide it as a thank you. For God's sake, Trina, please tell them. I'm just kidding. Here we go. I don't know. I'm in a good mood this morning, so let's roll with it. I don't know. As the eugenics movement continued to influence American legislature, the demographic of individuals being forcibly sterilized after the 1920s, and Black women became the main target of the movement, as they were sterilized at more than 3 times the rate of white women and 12 times the rate of white women from 1950 to 1966. This occurred as an attempt to maintain white supremacy and control Black reproduction to maintain the standing racial hierarchies. One of the earliest examples of white supremacist narratives in the work of authors is the 1899 poem, The White Man's Burden, by Rudyard Kipling, encouraged U.S. colonialism and argued that it was the white man's responsibility to civilize and control non-whites because they are not equipped to govern themselves. This sentiment reinforced the idea that white individuals and those that looked white were the only ones able to create successful societies across the globe, and encouraged the United States to maintain the colonial legacy that Europe had established by establishing colonies across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The idea that people of color were inherently barbaric was not supported by any facts, and emboldened whites to insert themselves into and control the lives of people of color for generations. While American imperialism did not last forever, the white desire to govern and police people of color continued in America, as it continues today, in a brutal kind of way. In the United States, white supremacy was supported by Jim Crow laws, which legalized racial segregation and allowed for supported rise of violent white supremacists, groups such as the Ku Klux Klan. Jim Crow laws were a way to maintain the racial hierarchy, which situated whites at the tops and Black people at the bottoms. These policies dictated what spaces people of color were allowed to occupy, restricted voting rights, segregated schools, and outlawed interracial marriage. Another way white supremacy was manifested in the United States was through physical violence, specifically lynching. According to the NAACP, the practice of lynching was a way for whites to terrorize and control Black people in the 19th and 20th centuries. These acts were extremely violent, as they included public murder of Black bodies, largely by hanging and mutilation. Lynching was a practice that existed throughout slavery, gaining popularity during the Reconstruction. It was a way to invoke fear in the Black public and dissuade them from trying to advance in society. Additionally, lynching was a way for white citizens to police the actions of Black individuals and celebrate their perceived superiority, If a black individual was suspected of committing a crime, they would be lynched in a very public spectacle. It demonstrated that America did not value black bodies, as lynching was often a group activity, with images of the victim's lifeless body being displayed in newspapers and postcards. Let me pause right there just to let you know we do have PDFs and publications, informational documentation that we provide to the Negro nation. Those awoke, those not too afraid to spoke. I don't know, it sounded good. But we have one that has all the photos that Facebook and these other social media platforms refuse to allow to be shown. They'll either cover the photos up or your account will be blown. I mean, if you post those photos, well, you should have known. All right, next, let's continue. White supremacy existed not only in America, but across the globe. For example, in Europe, Hitler's rise to power and the atrocities of the Holocaust resulted from white supremacy and later served as inspiration for later generations of white supremacists. Additionally, the origins of the Holocaust can be traced back to policies of white supremacy in the United States around that time. In 1925, Adolf Hitler published his anti-Semitic manifesto, Mein Kampf, in which he began to develop his plan for racial superiority in Germany. In his manifesto, he spoke favorably of the United States and viewed the country as an example of a healthy racist society. This belief persisted through the rise to power of the Nazi Party in the 1930s. During this time, Hitler and the Nazis consistently drew inspiration from the Jim Crow laws of the United States in the construction of Germany's Nuremberg laws. One specific example is the anti-miscegenation laws of the United States, which outlawed interracial marriage and relationships and imposed extreme punishments on individuals who violated those laws. Additionally, the Nazis looked to statements from previous American presidents, Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, to justify the forced migration of Jewish individuals. A few examples of white supremacist legislature in Germany are the Reich Citizenship Law and the Blood Law of 1935, which made Jewish individuals second-class citizens and prohibited the marriages and the sexual relationships of Jewish individuals and those who were considered Aryan. These policies eventually grew into the genocide of Jewish individuals across Europe, as they were perceived to be unpure in a similar manner to how blacks were viewed in the United States. Hitler's desire to maintain white supremacy was a very extreme and devastating manifestation of white supremacy, and while his actions were not supported by the world, the legalized policing of Jewish individuals in Germany was a source of inspiration for people who held the same or similar beliefs as him. Now, let me tell you something, folks. we're not talking out of our necks. This ain't an opinion. Let me tell you, thesis, master thesis. These things presented to teachers in order to pass on to the next level of effort to give you more letters in your name. These things are proven by reference. And this thesis is exactly the same. Look through, if you will, all that is written. You'll see at the bottom the notes that refer to all that we're expressing. I just wanted to tell you that because, there's a lot of appointments that she's addressing. So, it's just, okay, on with the show. In Africa, white supremacy dictated how European colonizers governed their colonies. In South Africa, the practice of apartheid functioned to maintain the power of South Africa's white minority over their black majority. While racial segregation existed in the country before apartheid, the practice, which lasted from 1950 to 1990, was a legal way to discriminate against black people on a social, economic, and political level. Practices of institutional segregation, such as apartheid, were not isolated in just South Africa. In fact, it was common across colonial Africa. The name, however, differed based on the colonial power. The French called it association, and the British and Portuguese called it indirect rule, or suzerains. Regardless of the name, in white-occupied territories, racial segregation was heavily enforced. Black individuals had no control over where they were allowed to live. Parts of the country they were allowed to visit, jobs they could occupy, or people they could be in relationships with. While the practice eventually was terminated, and European colonies in Africa dissolved white supremacy continues to exist and is deeply embedded in society. As time progressed, overt practices of racism were not widely accepted or legalized. White supremacy evolved with the times and became more discreet. To survive the changing climate of the world, white supremacy was forced to adapt to ensure that as the world changed, white individuals were still in control. Listen carefully. While racism is still very much present across the globe, a similar practice, colorism, exists as a more subtle tool of white supremacy. All right, so let me pause right there real quick. Let me tell you first. So this is how colorism comes into the picture. This is how the thesis evolves in front of us. And as I said, we're going to take our time with this one and get it well-read. I said well-read, I meant well-read. You know this. And so as we continue, we're going to define colorism. We're going to see how it connects, how it furthers white supremacy and the connection, because as we all know, Negroes in this country know, Negroes across the world know, the kind of racism that lay dormant before the time of Donald Trump was so subtle, it was so genteel. It was the racism you almost couldn't feel. Remember that? Nowadays, nearly in all their ways, they express just how racist they can truly be. And they just express it for all the goddamn world to see. They write manifestos and whatnot. Kind of copying copying the top guy a little bit, but when that's just a little bit interesting. Manifesto in the frame of a book, Mein Kampf. That was a manifesto, folks. You understand? Mein Kampf was a manifesto. What do these white supremacy crazed beings do before they go on a killing spree to me and you? What is it? I forgot. Did you? Okay, we got more reading to get to. Okay, here we go. Colorism. Colorism is defined as the process of discrimination that privileges white, light-skinned people of color over their dark-skinned counterparts. Consequently, colorism can impact any racial group. Across the globe, the origins of colorism for Latinos and people of African descent can be traced back to the colonial period. I'm going to pause there just for a minute so you hear it. In every respect, on all levels, don't let it escape your Negro notice. You hear me? I don't care what they're talking about, people of color. I don't give a damn about none of that nonsense. They're after Negroes. They've been after a select class and group of individuals, and they didn't stop until they had them in chains. Every other fact to me, just remains lucid in the face of what's in order. I mean, they're at the point, they're right on the border, but they want to talk about, people of color, Africans a lot. I gotta tell you, they ain't hitting the spot. It's Negroes. It's us. It's us that they're tracking. And I just trying to make sure none of y'all get found lacking. Let's move on, shall we? Sorry about that. It's always existed alongside racism, but it is largely under-researched in comparison. Colorism is a tool of white supremacy as it favors and rewards those who have closer proximity to whiteness. I think that's the definition. Let's do it again. Colorism is a tool of white supremacy. Almost you would have to fit in that space, in that it favors and rewards those who have close proximity to whiteness. Not that I'm rewriting her thesis, mind you, but moving on. The lighter the skin tone, the easier access to privileges and opportunities one is granted. According to Hepzibah versus Strimmick-Paul, Gonlin, and Garner, what? Colorism via colonialism and imperialism is largely rooted in the global spread of white supremacy, where being white and light meant one had the ability to be upwardly mobile, I tried to be cute, due to their social, political, and economic standing. They also argue that colorism operates on two levels. Interracially, colorism is practiced by whites who give preferential treatment to lighter individuals or ethnic groups through privileges in employment. Interracially, colorism is manifested by lighter-skinned individuals within a specific ethnic group being viewed as more successful, intelligent, and beautiful than their darker-skinned counterparts. Colorism, unlike racism, is practiced within racial groups and causes tension and division between individuals of the same race. Is a way that white supremacy can be facilitated by people of color and whites. Well now, I did not realize that, did you? We're probably going to learn a lot more before this is through. That's very, very interesting. So colorism is a mechanism that's activated within the people whom the colorism is against, so that whites have an assistant in this event. My God, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, let's continue. Okay, I like it. All right. In different regions of the world, colorism is different significance in the construction of societies. For example, across Latin America, the classification system that determines societal status is determined by phenotype and skin tone as opposed to ancestry. Through this system, there is more societal mobility for individuals with lighter complexion as they seek to distinguish themselves from darker-skinned individuals. By encouraging this distinction, Latin America promotes anti-Black sentiments, as an individual's value is determined by their proximity to whiteness. As time progresses and overtly racist policies dissipate, the necessity for social hierarchies persist. Consequently, skin color will continue to serve as the most obvious criterion in determining how a person will be evaluated and judged. Even in the most racially progressive communities, proximity to whiteness is valued. Proximity to whiteness. Now, what we have to ask ourselves is that being expressed here in these United Snakes? Do we have a proximity to whiteness problem? I don't know, I'm spitballing. I look at these folks, dude, I look at them, the senators, the representatives. I talk to some of these people. I try to talk sense to some of these people. They don't listen to me. They love this shit. And it's gotta be that proximity to whiteness that's doing it. It's gotta be. What else could it be? I suppose that these days, maybe the proximity to whiteness may have had some of the shine taken off of it. Yes. It's my belief, my understanding, they're looking at the actions of white society now, kind of side-eyeing these individuals. Let's hope a few of us take just a pause for the call. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Should we continue? Okay, we're done. Literature review. Sorry about that. Literature, goodness. Literature review. There we go. The origins of the term colorism can be attributed to author Alice Walker, who in 1982 defined the term as the prejudicial or preferential treatment of same-race people based solely on their color. Since the term was coined, there have been a lot of literature about colorism. However, the existing literature is heavily focused on the United States. Scholars look to slavery as one of the earliest examples of skin tone being directly associated with access to opportunity, specifically through the treatment of fair-skinned enslaved individuals having more access to education, better working conditions, and a higher chance of being granted freedom. Additionally, race hierarchies established by colonial powers consistently placed light-skinned individuals in a more elevated station than their darker counterparts. These racial hierarchies are still in place today, were also established by colonial powers in other parts of the world. Well now, boys and girls, What have we here? Looks like receipts. I don't know. Looks like it to me. What? We've been quiet too long. We've been silenced. We've been on the sideline. We've been looking, right? All the dancing and shooking and shucking and jiving and all that goddamn Negro conniving. We're on that shit. But now it might be time to open up our eyes. Now it might be time for Negroes to realize exactly all the maleficent lies. Hey, wake up. Next, here we go. Where we at? Okay, despite it being less heavily studied than in the United States, there is significant literature on the impact of colorism in other parts of the globe, such as Latin America and Asia. For example, in Latin America, the origins of colorism can be traced to colonialism. In the colonial period, Mexican societies were impacted by colorism, which affected enslaved and indigenous individuals. Despite the Spaniards being more likely than the British to intermix with the enslaved, a color-based caste system was in place which determined access to opportunity and subsequently quality of life. This method of classifying individuals based on color is manifested in the way that people of color view themselves in the modern age. While not as widely studied, colorism has also historically impacted Asian communities, but just barely though. Okay, that was really bad. Okay. Had to do that. Existing literature suggests that this case can be seen most in India as well as Japan. In fact, colorism in these Asian countries is understood to predate European contact, thus implying the presence of skin tone discrimination before the colonial period. Can you believe that? So they had within them a hatred for dark-skinned citizens before the colonists came to egg it on. How interesting. In these communities, skin tone is tied to desirability and consequently leads to the extreme success of the skin lightening industry in India and across the world. I'm not going to read all that. Good Lord. Those folks there analyzed how beauty is tied to complexion in India, Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea. And like many other researchers concluded that the attractiveness of women in these countries is heavily influenced by how light their skin is. Now, let me tell you this, as we pause there. Kamala Harris. Oh, yeah. Kamala, what up, girl? Kamala is of Indian, descent or persons, right? And while she was growing up, I saw a photo of her in her garb. And you can imagine the inculcation of just racism within her nation. And the caste system cast upon them just couldn't have missed them. It couldn't have missed her. No! And what did she do? She got into politics. She went to college, went to an HSBC, and she learned a swag, boy, let me tell you, right? She learned how to communicate with Negroes, and then she commenced in locking as many Negroes up as she could for the most trivial of bullshit. Now, I don't mean to digress, but you know that's what I do the best. Back to it. Yeah, all them people, like many others, got it. In many parts of the world, white is considered beautiful, even if there are no people of European descent living there. Colorism can and does survive and often thrives without white people needed to actively facilitate it. Many individuals misunderstand colorism as an issue that only impacts communities of color, mainly Black communities. However, many researchers agree that colorism and its effects can be felt and practiced across racial groups. The bulk of research has concluded that not only African Americans, but also Asian Americans, Hispanics, and Latinx. What's Latinx? Can somebody do me the Latinx? I don't know what Latinx, I guess it's, okay. Are all significantly stratified by skin tone. Perhaps even white Americans, pending systematic evidence, are stratified, at least to some muted degree, by skin tone, stratified. That means, I believe, kept at a certain level in elevation, stratified. We learn something new every day. These findings support the idea that colorism is a global issue, but there is a lack of research about how all these communities are impacted and to what extent. Now, let me say, I am, of course, feeling my voice go away, so I'm getting hoarse, and that means I gotta call it a day. But I am gonna continue this. I am gonna move through this until I complete it. I think that this is vital information, and Negroes need it. And so I offer to seed it. All you gotta do is ask me for it, and I'll send it. Okay, you can read ahead a little bit, upend it, I don't know. But I do appreciate you showing up for the show. My name is Doug Rice, 748. In the morning, you're on your way to work, I know. The day's dawning, and you gotta go. But before you decide that you wanna get up in their spaces, do me a favor, folks, get that goddamn grin off your faces. I gotta go. There's the